The Volkswagen SUV lineup can be a bit tricky to understand. On one side you have things like the T-Cross, the T-Roc, the Taygo, the Tiguan, and on the other side you have the Atlas and of course the Touareg. But right in the middle, that's the sweet spot, and that's where you have this, the Tiguan. Except Volkswagen have done it again. This is the Tayron, that's the Tiguan. So what's the difference? Which one is better and which is the one you should buy? I'm AJ, you're watching Autogefühl. Let's dive right in with the million-dollar question. What is this thing? Thankfully, there's a very simple answer. This is the Tiguan Allspace. In the previous generation here in Europe, we used to get the standard Tiguan with the 5-seat option, or the Tiguan Allspace, which was a longer wheelbase version with up to 7 seats. Now for this new generation, they're simply calling this the Tayron. It's a game of spot the differences between the two of these. I'll help you out. For example, these headlamps are a little bit more slim as compared to the more chunky design here in the Tiguan. And of course, you can see that even this front visor here is a little bit larger than the narrow one here. Speaking of which, this is illuminated and even the logo is illuminated as standard. You can upgrade these basic LED lights with the HD Matrix LED lights like the ones we have here. Both of these being the R-Line, the bumpers are a bit more sporty looking with glossy black, kind of grumpy looking design, downward pointing, as you can see here. The Elegance trim, on the other hand, as the name suggests, has more chrome accents and is a bit slimmer in the front, and personally the one I think looks better. The biggest difference is more evident, of course, on the side profile because the Tayron is larger, standing at 4.79 meters or about 25 centimeters longer than the Tiguan. That's not just the body, but also the wheelbase, which means that there's more room in the cabin. R-Line also means that you have glossy black wheel arches. Not sure how I feel about that, but I do like these sporty 20-inch rims. Another thing to note is that this belt line is quite high, meaning that the glass house isn't particularly large. So we'll see how that bodes in terms of interior visibility when we're driving later on. There's a bit of this bulge here on the shoulder line, but I do like this dash of chrome at the top of the window frame all the way down here to the D-pillar, kind of like the Passat to me. What do you think? The Tiguan to me is actually a lot more proportional looking than the Tayron, and even in the R-Line, because this doesn't have the black design pack, you still have nice dashes of chrome, for example, along the window frame. Even the wheel arches, although they are in glossy black, are a little bit more rounded as compared to the squared design in the Tayron. But overall, this is shorter, even the wheelbase is shorter, and the rear design here at the D-pillar is also a little bit more simplified. And finally, at the back, similar story, very subtle changes. Tail lamps, as you can see, the intricate inlay designs here through the clear lens on the outside are quite different. The shapes are very much different. And similar to the front, you do have an illuminated center line along with a red illuminated logo. Bumpers are very similar, more chrome, no chrome, but overall, which one do you think looks better? Put it down in the comments below. So let's take a look at the key fob of the Oryx White Tayron. Pretty standard Volkswagen key fob, but it has intelligent features, so you just approach the car and it will unlock, or you can put your hand in the handle and then it will open as well. Quick sound check. Pretty solid, no shimmies here. I also felt the air kind of pushing back, so a nice seal with the beading as well. The materials on the door are also really nice. I like the plush, soft material up here. This being the R-Line, you have this Alcantara kind of material along the top with this blue piping. Looks a bit monochromatic, but sporty, but there is this dash of color, quite literally, because you can change the color of the backlit, the backlight here in the LED on this inlay. I like the padding here, and while this is a little bit harder, that's okay because down here you have felt lining for the door pockets. So overall, I like that they have spent a little bit more effort into maintaining good quality for the materials. If we take a look inside, different seat options as well because of the different trims. R-Line means you have fabric seats inside with this leatherette and Alcantara kind of material with the integrated headrest and this sport design. So different options here. This is also the Ergo Active seat, which has things like massaging. Ooh, very nice. So let's get inside. It's definitely a lot higher off the ground than you would expect. And again, that belt line is pretty high, which means that when you're sitting inside, the windshield isn't necessarily very tall. So it does feel like you're sitting in a car. The view out is like that, but then you realize that, oh my God, I'm sitting like at a dining table. Look at how straight my knees are almost. So you're sitting very high up, which is great, but I don't know. I think if they had a slightly taller roof or a slightly lower belt line, I would have liked a little bit more airiness. Also in part thanks to this very dark interior with a black roof liner, black colors. So you can pick probably a lighter roof liner and it will make a big difference. So I would recommend that. But of course, the big talking point is this fabulous interior with this ginormous 15-inch optional touchscreen infotainment, but very wide, very, very tech-savvy kind of view. But I really love the fact that they're going back to basics with buttons on the steering wheel. So a little bit of both. You have some return to basics and you have some more modern day touch features. So let's dive into some more details. Inside, well, it looks really nice because of this huge 15-inch touchscreen. This is the optional extra. Standard you get 13 inches, but you have things like this inlay which has different lighting. You can change the colors, of course, and you have lighting down here as well. So really intricate lighting at night. That blue stitching here as well. A damped glove box, so that's also nice. Although this doesn't have that felt lining, it still has that textured plastic, just like this. As we go further down the side, padding along the side here, I do like this tray that you can keep additional things and even additional phones while you have two phones charging inductively. And yes, they are ventilated down here. USB-C ports as well to connect your phone, wireless and wired, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Glossy black center console here, yes, electronic parking brake, and this is a really nice multifunction dial. Also backlit. It also has a proximity sensor, of course, for the volume. But if you push the button, now you can use this to change the different drive modes, or you can swipe, and now you have different, they call it atmosphere, so it changes the color, the interior lighting, even the dashboard, the instrument cluster, for example. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, start-stop button. And this section here is actually quite versatile. I like how you have different options. Let's move the armrest out of the way, first of all. But then you can see you have cup holders, which have these spring-loaded clamps. You could just remove that whole thing, and now we have more storage space. This is another tray. You can also adapt where you put this, in which orientation. You can put this down here and move this over here instead. So a lot of different options for you. So you can use this space quite nicely. A charge 12-volt socket over there. A place to keep some coins and other loose items over here. Yes, this is a large screen. Yes, some people are not going to like that because you don't have any buttons, even for the climate control. Volkswagen is bringing some of them back, but as it stands here with this version of the Tayron, everything is operated here in the touch menu. These are kind of haptic feedback sliders that you can either tap or slide for the air conditioning. They are backlit, which is great because if you remember back many years ago, they were not even backlit. So at least they've got that right. But the benefit of having a big screen is that the icons are really large. So it's easy to tap on, if you want to change your vehicle settings. It's very easy. It's not close to another button that you might accidentally press. So I like that the size brings with it some of these inherent benefits. Tons of assistance systems like lane keeping assist, speed warning, some things for fun like, you can change the background mood lighting or use some of these atmospheres like I was saying earlier. If you were to even kind of use the dial here, you can see that it changes the color. It also changes the instruments as well. Like this is the lounge mode. I don't know what's so lounge about it. This is joy. And then energetic, it kind of gives that sporty view. so on and so forth. But you even have extreme funny things, like there's an air console. So I suppose because this is a plug-in hybrid, if you're charging your car and you're taking a 30-minute break anyway, you can turn on this console for gaming. You can use your phone, and I tried this. It's actually pretty fun. Just scan the QR code, your phone becomes a controller, and you have kart games, soccer games, Pac-Man kind of games. So gamification. This is kind of the opposite of what Slate is up to nowadays. If you've been following the news there with the new Slate manufacturer going back to basics, this is a little bit extra, but I guess it makes sense when you're waiting for your car to charge. And finally, seat and heating climate options. You have a separate sub-menu that you have to use, and then you can, turn it on and off. You have different standard controls here, different zones. The seat option here also gives you the massaging option, so you can turn on different kinds of stretching. So Michelle, I'm gonna give you a stretching massage now. Ooh, look at that. So the inflatable air bags, if you want to call it like that, which is used for the lumbar support, there's just a program which inflates and deflates them as that. And of course, you have seat heating, steering wheel heating. Those kinds of controls are over here.
So I'm gonna enjoy the massage now.
Go ahead.
See you in 20 minutes.
See you in 20 minutes. While the infotainment is all touchscreen, it's amazing to see that Volkswagen have listened to customer feedback and have brought back real buttons for the steering wheel. This right-hand side controls, for example, things like menus and options and views on the digital instruments. For example, you can change the layout. You can also change what kinds of information you get to see on the different sections of the layout. Similarly, on the other side, you have buttons for the adaptive cruise control, the lane keeping assist, so you can use that here to set and change the speed and those driver assistance systems. There are paddle shifters on the back because this does have a petrol engine, so you can use that to change through the 6-speed DSG. One giant stalk here on the right side for the transmission, a giant stalk on the left side for the wipers and the lights. And finally, a lot of useful information here on the digital instruments, which again, as you saw, you can customize the view and the colors, and we'll talk a little bit more about this once we're driving. There's also an optional head-up display which gives you your driver assistance system notifications, speed, and navigation notifications. Things are looking really good back here in the second row of the Tayron, because look at the amount of leg space that I have. I'm 5'4", or about 1.7 meters. This is set to my driving position, and I have amples of leg room. Remember, this is also a longer wheelbase, so because of the longer wheelbase, there's more space down here in the floor. I can also slide this bench further up to liberate more room, or if you have the 7-seat version, liberate more space back there. And three AJs sitting one behind the other can totally fit, no problem at all. I can also change the angle of recline of the bench, so plenty of practicality. You have nice phone pockets at the top of the seats. You have more seat back pockets lower down. You also have a separate climate zone here for the rear passengers, including heated seats. Ooh, luxurious. And it doesn't stop there, because look at this. You have visors as well if you want some privacy, or also just to block the sun. And the materials are also quite nice. So you still have soft materials here with that Alcantara, soft plush leatherette padding here for the armrest. A little bit harder plastics, but still felt lining on the door pockets down here. So I'm actually really happy to see that Volkswagen have put in good materials even in the back seat. And in the previous generation of the Tiguan Allspace, I did complain quite a bit about the panel gaps and the lack of high quality materials. They were mostly hard plastics. So I'm happy to see that at least if you're going to charge more, give more value. Isofix child mounts on the outside 2 seats only, not in the middle. But speaking of which, it's actually a pretty flat flat bench. Not much of a transmission tunnel, so 3 adults can fit here. I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable. It's going to be a little bit tighter, but somebody my size shouldn't have a problem. If you don't have 3 passengers, you can use this as a armrest. You can pull this out. You can put your phone or your iPad up here to watch something. Knock those down. You have some cup holders, or just tumble this whole thing down and you have access to the trunk or to keep your skis. Headroom is also really nice. Also in part because there is no panoramic roof. You can get that optionally if you like. This is the key fob for the nightshade blue Tiguan that we have. It's of course keyless entry, so you approach the car or put your hand on the handle and it unlocks. Sound check is pretty good, although I do see a little bit of shimmy over there. The materials on the inside actually are a little bit different here in the Tiguan as compared to the Tayron. Can you guys spot the difference? I would say this right here, right? This was Alcantara. In the Tayron here, it's got that leatherette finish. But still, nice padding all around. And also nice to see that they have carried forward the felt lining in the door pockets. But taking a look inside, with the R-line here, the seats are also very much the same, with the leatherette and the Alcantara up here and the fabric seats down here. Different options, of course, if you don't want the integrated sports seat or the integrated headrest in this R-line sports seat. Getting inside actually feels a little bit more lower. I think this Tiguan has a slightly more, car-like feeling about it as well, like the Tayron. The first impressions, of course, from the driver's seat is pretty much identical to the Tayron. Yes, some of the design and material choices are different, like that leatherette, which is replacing the Alcantara material, but everything else, the glove box, the damping, all of this central console area, and of course this infotainment system, the 15-inch optional infotainment system, everything else is pretty much identical. This particular Tiguan that we have here on test does not have the head-up display, but then you can of course get that as an option. The difference of course is bigger here in the second row of the Tiguan because shorter wheelbase, which means the space here is a little bit less. That being said, I do like the materials on the door. It is a little bit more simple than I would say in the Tayron. This particular car doesn't have the shade, but I do like this plush material. And hey, look at some of these cool little Easter eggs. But you still have things like the additional climate zone, seat heaters, USB-C charging points, seat pockets, including the ones on the top here for the phone. And overall, I have plenty of knee room, even though this is a bit shorter, of course. I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters. This is set to my driving position, so I do have plenty of space. I can also, like we saw in the Tayron, slide the seat further up and change the angle of recline of the backrest to liberate more space if I would like in the trunk. So more similarities there, more similarities over here in terms of the center armrest as well. The middle seat here in the back bench is actually not too bad. Plenty of headroom, again no panoramic roof, and I have space for my feet. And finally, if you look at that little Easter egg over there on that side, what is that? That's a tiger. It's a pretty funny story because the Tiguan, of course, is named after the tiger and the iguana, the respective names in German. So you have the Tiguan. What do you think about that backlit logo? But just below it is the button to open the automatic tailgate. And this here is 705 liters of trunk volume here in the plug-in hybrid version, which is a 5-seater in the Tayron. Of course, if you have the non-hybrid version or the 7-seat version, the trunk volume changes, as you can expect. But with my ruler, I can show you that this is about 40 inches long, or about 101 centimeters. So it's very flat, nice and wide, and also pretty tall at about 76 centimeters or about 30 inches. So definitely very usable. You also have these nice hooks that you can bring down to clamp or to hold up your grocery bags. You have some storage cubbies on the left and right. Even a tray up here that, of course, when you have the parcel shelf covering it, you can, keep some things away down there. Down here, you have your charging cable and more space. Further items can be tucked away over here. I also like the fact that along with this 12-volt power socket, there's actually a power socket itself. That's pretty cool and useful. And also I like that we have these switches here to tumble the seats. And you can see that that one didn't fall pretty much all the way down. But now with the seats down, it's 1,915 liters of volume. So plenty of usability in the Tayron. All right, let's take a look at the trunk in the Tiguan. As expected, this is smaller at 652 liters. But to make sense of that, here's that ruler again. The Tayron came all the way to here for 101. This is about 88 centimeters or about 34 inches. But it's still pretty rectangular. It's still pretty wide. Below this, similarly, you don't have any extra space. You have some space here, but it's occupied by the charging cables. You don't have as many hooks and clamps as you did with the seats folded down. You have about 1,668 liters. So still plenty. And the compact dimensions also actually is a benefit if you live in small cities. As expected, they both share the same VW Group engines, gearboxes and drivetrains. Starting things off with a 1.5 TSI, which is the mild hybrid turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, good for about 150 horsepower. You have a 2-liter TSI with 204 horsepower, a 2-liter TDI, the Turbo 4 diesel, or this, the plug-in hybrid, which has a 1.5 TSI, that same engine, but with a 20 kilowatt hour battery pack and an additional 115 horsepower electric motor for a combined system output of 204. Now you can have this only with automatic DSG transmissions, either 6 or 7, depending on the drivetrain. In the plug-in hybrid, it's 6-speed, but also only in front-wheel drive. Some of the other engine options do have the 4-motion coupling-based all-wheel drive option as well. Of course, being a plug-in hybrid, both of these SUVs can be charged with up to a 50 kilowatt DC charger. And the claimed electric-only range, for example, for the Tayron is 126 kilometers. Here for the Tiguan, it'll be a little bit more. But the good news is, if you're going to be driving this within the city to commute to work every day, and you're able to charge it once or twice a week, you can get by completely in electric mode. All right, so first we're in the Tayron, and already a good chance to show you one of the things I'm not too fond of, and that would be the resolution of the backup camera. You can see that it's not the best. I do love these top-down 360-degree cameras, and because this is a pretty large vehicle when you're navigating through those tiny little lanes in underground parking lots here in Europe, I also miss a one-button shortcut to directly turn these cameras on. So a couple things I don't like. Interesting, the front camera seems a little bit better than the reverse camera. Anyway, so let's start by talking about how the Tayron feels to drive in small cities here in Europe, and then we'll take it out on some winding roads and then also on the highway to test some of the driver assistance systems. So first, let's go down here to sport mode. Combined output of 204 horsepower, a little bit of torque steer. That 1.5 TSI is a very smooth engine. We know this quite well, but here in this plug-in hybrid, guys, it's not really that exciting. It doesn't really sound that engaging, even in the sport mode, but it's not designed to be a R. This is just the R line, right? So it's, at the end of the day, it's still very comfort oriented. So let's go back into comfort mode as we now settle into this little village here. Because of that higher belt line, as I was mentioning, I do find myself having to peer over the door sill or across the bonnet to try to place this car. Like, for example, here's a very narrow lane, and then there's a car coming in front. I need to squeeze through this gap. It's not uncomfortable. It's, of course, in the grand scheme of things, it is not an excessively large car, but it does make its presence known. The steering is really light though, and that really helps here at slow speeds. It's also a nice progressive steering rack, so as I turn the wheel more, the angle of change or deflection of the wheels itself keeps increasing, so I don't need to make a lot of turns lock to lock. But it's very smooth, and I think one of the highlights of this platform is the DCC Pro, this advanced chassis control damping system. It's actually really good. It does a really good job of making the car ride ever so smoothly on, there's cobblestones, there's potholed roads right here. I barely feel any of that filtering through to the cabin, and it's really easy. See, another tight gap here. I would have loved that 360 camera, but yes, the suspension is really good, and we'll put it back into sport mode momentarily, and that also makes the chassis a lot more dynamic and taut in the sport mode. But here in this comfort mode, given that this car is really, the personality is definitely a more comfort-oriented personality, I think this DCC Pro, the comfort mode, is all the more for it. This hybrid also means that, like I just did right now, when I want a sudden burst of power to make a quick overtake, that electric motor takes over, gives me that instant push, and it's so seamless how it brings the engine back in and keeps shuffling between the two motors. All right, let's go back into sport mode now that we're out of that village. Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound so nice. Steering definitely has torque steer. The weight of the steering increases, but it's definitely not very communicative. Front wheel drive also only, no all wheel drive for the plug-in hybrid. So it's definitely it doesn't feel like it was meant to do this, but it can definitely hold pace if you need to drive a bit more quickly. Definitely can keep pace with faster flowing traffic, or if you're in a bit of a rush, definitely can do that. The regenerative braking also is really nice and progressive. It gives you confidence, and it jumps in with the friction brake as and when needed. As you can feel on these bad roads in the sport mode, the suspension definitely has a bit more rigidity to it, but at the same time it has, because it actually has a newer 2-valve technology, it's able to be more quick in the way it reacts to different frequencies of modulation. So quick rumbles on bad roads are also smoothened out, but slow tipping and body roll is well contained. So definitely I like the DCC, but the engine and the overall dynamic character of this car is definitely not very sporty. So let's take it on the highway and talk about that for a little bit. On the ramp into the Autobahn, here in the Tayron, also in comfort mode, joining into the traffic here. Yeah, so you can also get optionally acoustic glass, and that further makes the inside of the cabin quiet. But on its own, this car doesn't have that. It's actually really nice and comfortable. In fact, at slower speeds below 100 kilometers an hour, it's exceptionally quiet. Here on the Autobahn at about 130 kilometers per hour, it's okay, it's not luxury level quiet, but it's definitely one of the more quieter cars. And some of the earlier generation VW Group cars did suffer from that refinement, and I'm glad to see that they have addressed that issue here. Another great talking point, of course, is the ADAS system. So VW Group's ADAS system has come a long way, and they keep making these great little incremental advancements. And I like now, for example, here you can see that it's kind of like what Tesla has. I can see, oh, there's a truck on the right side, and then there's a car on the left side. I can see how the ADAS system is visualizing the environment around me, and because I can see, and it's showing me what it sees, it gives me more confidence. I don't know if that really made sense, but I know that this is seeing that car there, so I can see that it's understanding this car is pulling in front of me right now. So I feel more comfortable and confident in trusting it. So that way, it's a really good system. I like the visualization, traffic sign recognition. It even slows you down when you're going on the country roads and you're approaching a roundabout or an exit. It matches things with the navigation. So it's a really intelligent, adaptive driver assistance systems based not just on these inputs, but also the navigation itself. Steering also is taken care of. It holds you in the middle of the lane very confidently, very comfortably. And yeah, here as well, you can change the view so that you're able to see this a lot better. The visibility in general, I think, is not an issue when you're on the highway because you're focused mostly in front of you. The side windows are nice and big so that it helps when you're changing lanes. The visibility out the back is really nice. And this upright seating position with, my feet flat on the floor, great under-thigh support, and let's not forget, massaging seats really means that long-distance cruising with the family, even a 7-seater, right? So even with your full family, it's a great family cruiser that way. This also has the optional Harman Kardon sound system, which sounds really fantastic, top-notch. And in general, I do like the highway mannerisms of the Tayron. This is where it definitely shines. This is where it, this kind of a driving is more suited rather than the sporty driving. That being said, however, and I've been driving for about 3 to 4 hours just today, I'm getting around 7.7 liters for 100 kilometers. And because I've been doing a lot of highway miles, I haven't really seen much use of the hybrid system in terms of the electric motor. So it really varies. There's a huge range of numbers you'll see just because of how you're driving this car. If you're driving in the city and you're charging it every day, then for sure you can run purely electric to get to your work and back on a daily basis. But if you are spending more time on the highway like I am, then the petrol engine is most often the powertrain, and then you're not necessarily getting a whole lot of mileage, unfortunately. But that being said, for a car of this size, I think it's definitely respectable, if not all right. All right, now in the smaller Tiguan, but same tech, so same thing about these cameras here. But same engine, plug-in hybrid, 204 horsepower in the combined output of the 1.5 TSI and the electric motor. But this being smaller and lighter, it accelerates 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 8.2 seconds as compared to 8.6 seconds. But let's not take their word for it. Here we go. Well, a little bit of wheel spin. Oh, a little bit of torque steer. It's not blistering. It's fun, and already it does seem a little bit more sprightly than the Tayron. The shorter wheelbase also does mean that, for example, these kind of sharper turns, it feels a little bit more on its tippy toes because that added wheelbase on the Tayron does make it a lot more planted, which is a good thing for high-speed stability in a straight line, but so you do feel it a little bit. But the width is pretty much the same. So now that we're in the city, let's go back to comfort mode. Steering is also nice and light. So here, from behind the wheel in the city, you don't really feel that length. And since the width is, the same, I think that it's just the same in the city. That is to say that it's very easy to maneuver. It's not a super mini. It's not a subcompact. It is still on the, it's in the mid tier in terms of size. So you do need to calibrate yourself a little bit. It's not the T-Roc or the T-Cross, right? But it definitely isn't a handful. It's not going to make you get stuck and hold up traffic. So therefore, it's very easy. The suspension, again, is really nice on these cobblestone streets here with these bumpy little lanes. Visibility is, again, very similar. And right now, as I can see here on the instrument cluster, I'm driving in pure electric mode, so that's also really nice. This being smaller, it does give slightly better mileage, so even this car has been driven quite extensively today for several hours, mostly on the highway, and the numbers we're seeing here is definitely lower than the Tayron. So this is definitely another important distinction between the two SUVs. This is 6.9 liters for 100 kilometers. So that's quite a lot less. Again, because of this hybrid powertrain, if you're able to charge it and how you drive, if it's mostly highway, mostly in the city, makes a big difference between the two numbers. But because this is a lighter vehicle in general, this is definitely a clear indication that you do get better mileage. Back on the winding roads, back in sport mode, definitely a lot of torque steer because of that electric motor, I suppose, because it jumps in right away to give you that instant torque. So yeah, definitely this R line is no R. And that goes without saying, I know, but I'm going to say it anyway. Suspension is definitely a little bit more jiggly here. If you rewind a little bit in the video and see me and my face and how much my face was jiggling on the same road just a few minutes ago in the Tayron, I think you can also see that this is feeling a little bit more bouncy than the Tayron. So very subtle differences, but differences nonetheless. Is it a make or break? No. So ultimately the driving dynamics are comparable. The differences in the handling characteristics are as expected due to the weight and the wheelbase. But of course, the last component is how does it fare on the highway? So let's take it out there. Going down the ramp to the Autobahn, here in the Tiguan. Here we go, and let's use the same nice adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist system. In general, it feels very, very similar. To be honest, you can't really tell the difference between the two because at these speeds, especially if you have luggage and people sitting down and there's weight on the suspension, you really won't feel the difference in that extra size between the two SUVs, even with the wheelbase being a bit larger. It's at slower speeds or like on winding roads where the difference is a little bit more apparent. At speeds like this, and when you're driving mostly straight, it really doesn't make a difference. So the same strengths carry forward, but I do say that this is a bit louder between the Tayron and the Tiguan. I can't imagine why. So I would recommend, because especially with the cruising abilities that these SUVs have, that having a nice quiet cabin really makes a long drive so much more pleasant and less fatiguing, since there is the option for the acoustic glass and you can get that as part of another packet, so you don't have to buy it separately. I would definitely recommend you pick the acoustic glass packet and then the sound insulation is improved. But overall, the experience is still very similar. Mileage is definitely better, but the technology is definitely, since it's the same, it's very confidence-inspiring. The seats are also really nice and comfortable. This is also the R-line seat, and even though it has integrated head restraints, it doesn't feel unnatural or uncomfortable. The side bolstering is also not too dense or not too thick. You also have the seat massage option here in the optional seat packet that we have on these test cars, but you do not have the ability to adjust like the thickness of the side bolstering, but you do have the ability to adjust things like the amount of under-thigh support. You can extend the base of the seat. But interestingly, the controls for the seats are still very manual here in the sport seat. So even the reclining, even the raising the height of the seat, these are all manual, which means if you're sharing this car with your spouse, that saving your seat setting is not possible. And this is actually a really important thing for me. I don't know, especially when I give the car to the workshop and the mechanic has moved the seat completely in and out all around because they want to access different things. I feel like I can never get the right seating position right away. It always feels like it takes me a few days to get back to my perfect seating position. Maybe I'm a little bit OCD about this, but are you guys the same way? Do you get annoyed when somebody moves your seat in your car? This is why automatic seats with memory function, to me, are such a basic requirement so that you can quickly save your seat's position, your spouse can save their seat's position, so on and so forth, and no matter what has changed, you can simply push that button and bring it back. I don't have that with these R-Line seats. So that's definitely one drawback. And again, because this R-Line is really not a sporty SUV, the performance, the sound, it's still not that sporty. I feel like you're probably better off with the elegance trim and with a nice fabric seat which has nice comfortable contouring as compared to, with memory, as compared to this R-Line seat. But overall, it's safe to say the main difference between these two SUVs and the decision, the deciding factor for your decision, quite simply is, do you need a bigger SUV with 7 seats or not? That's about it. And of course, this deciding factor comes down to another key piece, and that's the price. This Tiguan R-Line plug-in hybrid is a whopping 70,000 euros. This Tayron R-Line plug-in hybrid is a whopping 73,500 euros. That's GLC money. But if you're smart with the options and you don't have an incentive to buy a plug-in hybrid, stick with one of the lower trims and a smaller engine and you can easily save 20,000 euros. So at the end of the day, in Europe, the choice between these two SUVs from a price standpoint is really not that different. And since they both drive and handle almost identical to each other, you might as well get the Tayron and have that additional flexibility of more seats or more space, because even from a city driving perspective, there's not that much of a difference. Therefore, this is my pick of the two. But that being said, for example, if you're in the US, the Tayron will not be built in Wolfsburg, but in Mexico, and this Tayron will be what you will get as your Tiguan, so you don't really have a choice there. Similarly, in China, it will be built in a Chinese partner factory. So at the end of the day, in Europe, you do have both of these options, but this one just makes the most sense. Why don't you also check out some of these other videos of its competitors and siblings like the Kodiaq, and let me know which is your pick. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.